Picture the scene. It's Vienna. The year is 1913. We're right in the heart of a cold, snowy January in one of the grandest cities on Earth. And this isn't just any city. It's a true metropolis at the absolute height of its power. The capital of a sprawling empire, just buzzing with new art, radical ideas, and, well, people. 2 million of them, all with their own lives, their own dreams, all crammed together. And for just a few short weeks in that massive crowd, 2 of those completely anonymous faces belong to a down-on-his-luck Austrian painter and a revolutionary from Georgia. That's right, they were both there, in the very same city, at the very same time. Now, to really wrap our heads around this unbelievable coincidence, we have to understand the city itself. This was Vienna in 1913, the glittering, chaotic, and frankly, deeply troubled heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. An empire that, although nobody knew it yet, was right on the verge of collapse. So what's so fascinating here is just the sheer mix of everything happening at once. I mean, on the surface, Vienna was this beacon of high culture and intellectual life, but bubbling just underneath, it was a total pressure cooker. You had socialists running the city government, but the streets were just simmering with all these nationalist hatreds, Germans against Slavs, Slavs against Hungarians. It was a magnet for radicals and political outcasts from all over. This was the wild, chaotic world that our 2 men found themselves in. All right, let's meet our first character. But to do this, you have to try and forget everything you know about him, because in 1913, he was a complete and utter nobody. And this, right here, is the key thing to remember. The Adolf Hitler of 1913 is just 24 years old. He's officially unemployed and totally unknown. He's scraping by, selling these little watercolor paintings of city landmarks, mostly to tourists. He's not in any political party, he has 0 influence, and he barely has any friends to speak of. He's just another guy trying not to starve in the big city. And you can really see how isolated he was. He was living in a cheap men's dormitory, basically a hostel for working-class men. His days were spent painting, reading the papers, and getting into political arguments with the other guys in the dorm. Now, he was definitely soaking up all the toxic, anti-Semitic, and nationalist ideas that were floating around Vienna. But, and this is important, he was doing it from the absolute fringes of society. He wasn't debating in those famous intellectual cafes. No, his world was made up of other struggling artists and tradesmen. Okay, so now let's switch gears to our second character, and you'll see right away it's a totally different story. While Hitler was just aimlessly drifting through life, Joseph Stalin showed up in Vienna with a single laser-focused mission. So yeah, no aimless drifting for Stalin. At 34, he was already a hardened, professional revolutionary. He wasn't in Vienna to, find himself. He was there on a specific assignment, sent by Vladimir Lenin himself. This was a man with a purpose. And just look at how quick and efficient his trip was. He gets there, he hits the libraries, he writes this major essay about how the Bolsheviks should deal with all the different ethnic groups in the Russian Empire. He meets up with other revolutionaries, like Leon Trotsky, and boom, he's gone. For Stalin, Vienna was just a work trip, a month-long assignment before heading back to Russia, where he was immediately arrested by the Tsar's secret police, by the way. So there you have it. 2 men who would go on to become 2 of history's most monstrous dictators, living in the same city for the same month. The big question is, in a city of 2 million people, what were the odds that their paths would ever actually cross? I mean, the gap between them is just night and day when you put it side by side like this. You've got the unemployed artist versus the professional revolutionary. One is just trying to survive in a men's shelter, the other is on a serious intellectual mission. And here's the most important part. Look at their circles. Hitler was hanging around German-speaking nationalists. Stalin was only dealing with a very small, tight-knit group of Russian-speaking socialists. They were basically living in 2 completely separate Viennas that just happened to occupy the same physical space. But there was one place, one potential point where these 2 separate worlds could have intersected. The legendary Viennese coffee houses, places like the famous Café Central, were the intellectual hearts of the city. It's where everyone went to talk, to read, to argue. We know Trotsky was a regular, we know Hitler was known to go there sometimes, and we even know that Stalin was there at least once during his very short stay. So the possibility, it was there. They could have been sitting just a few tables away from each other. And that leads us right to the core question of this entire strange story, this incredible historical near miss. So, did it happen? Did the failed artist and the Bolshevik revolutionary ever lock eyes over a cup of coffee, completely oblivious to the terrifying future that awaited them both? Well, the historical consensus is a pretty definite no. And the reasons why are actually pretty simple. First, as we've already seen, they lived in completely different social and even linguistic universes. Hitler, the German nationalist, couldn't care less about Marxism and didn't speak a word of Russian. Stalin was deep inside this little bubble of Russian exiles. Second, Vienna was huge, 2 million people. The idea that any two random guys would just bump into each other was, well, it was incredibly slim. And third, and this is the big one, they were both nobodies. In 1913, neither one of them was important or famous at all. There was just no reason for their paths to ever have crossed. So the final verdict is pretty clear. Despite how tantalizing it is to think about, there is not a single shred of evidence that they ever met. Nothing in any memoir, nothing in a police file, nothing in any archive. As far as we know, they remained total strangers. So, what are we supposed to make of all this? How should we think about this bizarre little wrinkle in time, when history held its breath and didn't even realize it? Historians are pretty clear on this. It's a fantastic coincidence, a great bit of trivia, for sure, but its real value isn't some big what if. It's what it shows us about how history actually works. It's a reminder that history isn't some grand, pre-written story. The monsters of the future start out as the anonymous, insignificant people of today. A failed artist in a men's shelter, a radical on a research trip. Their paths didn't cross, but this moment shows us how the biggest events in history can start as the smallest, quietest ripples in a very, very large pond. And I think this quote just perfectly captures the whole thing. Even in that one cafe, the one physical space where their worlds might have actually touched, they were just two ships passing in the night. Two anonymous men on completely different journeys who would one day collide with enough force to change the entire world. But back then, in the winter of 1913, they were just two strangers in a very big crowd. Which leaves us with one final kind of haunting thought to chew on. Just imagine that 1 in a million chance happened. The 24-year-old painter and the 34-year-old revolutionary actually strike up a conversation. What on earth would they have said to each other? I'm genuinely curious what you think. Let me know down in the comments. And hey, if you enjoyed this little trip back in time, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks so much for watching.